Good morning, Chris Worden, Andy Jones-Wilkins here at the Aravaipa Running Studios here in sweltering Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes,
and we are proud to present our first post-game show for the Sonoran Desert Cup, K Creek Thriller 24K.
Yeah, and Chris, you were out there. You talk about sweltering. Let's jump right in. It was a hot day.
It was unbelievably hot. One of the things about this race that I've always noticed, I've been running this race in one form or another since about 2015. So I've been out there most years that this race has been in existence. This race, with the exception of a couple years where it took place in December, is always unbelievably hot. Like there's a bit of a second summer that always comes through the valley in October. Runners will be facing with that in about 10 days at Heavily 100, but this weekend was no exception. And I want to say that one of the unusual things that happened this weekend was that there were DNFs pretty much across the board. Not just in terms of the 50K, where you'll usually have a couple here and there, but there was only about an 82% finisher rate in the 50K. There were drops in the 24K. There were even drops in the 11K out there because the course, you go out for about a 6K loop and you hit the Gojon Aid, which is less than a quarter mile from the start-finish line. You can see the start-finish line.
Yeah.
And runners, rather than going out for the final 5K loop, they would just
called it a day at 6K.
Yeah. They would be completely satisfied. They had gotten their heart rate elevated. They had gotten their blood pumping, and they decided they wanted to go and hang out in the shade and grab a cool drink.
Well, and for those of you who aren't here in the Valley, we have had about 2 weeks of consistent record-breaking heat, over 100 degrees, some days creeping up to 108, 109 for the last 2 weeks. It's finally breaking. Might break in time for Javelina, as you mentioned. But it should have come as no surprise to folks that they were going to get walloped. When we talked on the pre-show, when we talked about the course, that sort of prelude section, right, it's a point-to-point, wide open, no shade, really exposed, just kind of baking in the sun. So by the time they get to that mountain section, it was pretty cooking.
Yeah, and having spoken with several runners that were out there, both in the front and the back of the pack, it definitely wore on them more as the day went on. And I know in some cases getting their way around that final 5K took in excess of 45 minutes. Yeah. So it was pretty rough out there.
So this was the kickoff, the first event of the inaugural Sonoran Desert Classic Cup Series. It's it's a series of ultimately 8 races, and we're really excited about it. And how did the race play out? I mean, you were able to kind of see the finishers. And in the 24K, we'll touch on the other distances as well. But in the 24K, which is the Sonoran Desert Cup race, how did it play out?
Yeah, so I was out there obviously doing the 5K for myself, just stretching the legs, and gave me a chance to grab some coffee and a nice cold cup of water and just wait for the elites to come in on the 24K loop. And even the fastest runners, you could see that they were working through it that day. Our congratulations to our winner in that, Julian Kuyu, who ran a 1:51:20, which is a pretty solid time on that course. It's not course record by any stretch. I believe that's about 9 minutes off the course record. But for the day that was going on out there, it was a pretty impressive time. And for Julian, who has finished in the podium twice in this race before, this was a PR by about 3 minutes.
So. And I know because Julian told me he is on the list for Pass Mountain already.
Yeah.
He's ready to go for race number 2.
Yeah, I think that Julian came out here wanting to show what he could do, and he did, and now he's in the driver's seat as far as the front of the pack for the Sonoran Desert Cup. Cody Goodwin came in about 2 minutes back of him in 1:53:27. Cody was somebody I wasn't familiar with. He's a member of the PHX Run Club, led by Josh Walker, a friend of our Aravaipa family here. And Cody seemed like he was having a good time. He was having a great time out there. A little bit less worked than Julian was when he came in, but you can definitely tell, and we'll talk about the interviews that I had afterwards as well, but that he was genuinely happy with how things turned out.
Do you think, I don't know if you asked him, but is he planning on hitting up Pass Mountain in a couple of weeks?
I believe he is.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, third place on the men's side was actually kind of interesting. So we had, after our postgame show, actually Saturday morning, I found out that Aravaipa Racing Team member Devin Sharps was entering the race. Had no idea that he was going to jump in. And when I found that out, I assumed that Devin was going to be in position to potentially win this race. He's a quicker, shorter distance runner. Typically, up to the 20 mile is really where he gets it done. And he ended up finishing third. And it was a dogfight for third because he and Kurt Houghton, Kurt has finished on the podium at this race before. Devin finished about 20 seconds ahead of Kurt at the end of the 24K, and that doesn't really quite tell the tale of what I saw.
In other words, it looked to you closer than that.
Yeah, and when I spoke with Devin, he did confirm that the two of them were jockeying as far as the last mile of the course.
Okay.
And what happens is, as I've told you, the way that this course unfolds is that as you're hitting this last curve up on an elevated section, you can see the finish line from about a little bit more than a half mile away. So you can feel like, okay, if I've got the legs, I can just run this out. Well, it sounds like Devin and Kurt were really, pushing to the point where they were coming over that hill almost in lockstep. And Devin pushed harder at the end and was able to outkick Kurt. And when Devin came in, he was on full send. He was flat out sprinting to get it in. And Kurt came in 20 seconds later on a jog. So you could tell that it was pretty close there.
So it could have been one of those things where where Devin might have put a final hammer down. Kurt was not able to respond, and it just sort of kind of jogged it in. It looks like there was still a good 6 minutes until Megan, who was the fifth place overall, first place woman, came in. So they sort of knew that they were jockeying for third and fourth.
Yeah, and I think that what really surprised me the most is that when Julian and Cody hit the final aid station at Gojon, they were about a minute apart, and that seemed to hold. Julian opened up one more minute after that. But what really shocked me was that they had built a 9-minute lead on Devin and Kurt and then proceeded to make it even further, basically a separation of over 14 minutes between second and third.
And that's a big gap in a
huge
24K.
It's absolutely huge. And Devin and Kurt are very strong runners. Looking further down on the men's side, Dan Roeder out of Tempe, our first place Masters runner, 2:14.59 in fifth place. One runner that I had on my pre-race podium, Joe Boucher out of Vegas, another Aravaipa Racing Team member, finished sixth. Matt Heacock, another local, seventh. Michael Huber, eighth. Shane Ho out of Newbury Park, California, in ninth. And Timothy Lamana out of Gilbert, Arizona, in 10th. So those were the way that things shook out on the men's side. There was quite a bit of separation once you got further down. I would say after Matt Heacock, there was those were your faster guys. The other guys after that point, got into the top 10, but I think that those are the kind of runners that you might see in the Damn Good Run final as long as they keep on accumulating points.
Right, and let's face it, this is not a sprint. This is a marathon if they're interested in making it to that Damn Good Run finals. So, while the top 10, it is a spread of almost an hour, it's not aggregate time.
Yeah.
It's actual placing, sort of old school cross-country scoring.
Yep.
So, for a first kickoff event, this is great. And I think all the way down to Shane and Timothy, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. So sliding over to the women's race, that went pretty much to form, at least in terms of 1 and 2. And I thought that we have to pat ourselves on the back there for being somewhat prescient on calling somebody out in their their trail running debut. Megan Kupris, the current course record holder, ended up winning with a time of 2:14.22. Now, that's 16 minutes off of Megan's previous course record. Now, granted, that was in December. That was one of the 2 years that the race took place close to Christmas, so it was much cooler back then. But 16 minutes is a huge gap again when you're talking about between what somebody ran, and I think that even more amazing about that is that Megan is faster now than she was in 2020.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, Megan did a couple of things. She was kind of a last minute drop down to the 24K.
Yeah.
She was originally signed up for the 50K. Did she give you, you're the scoop man, did she give you any indication about what her plans might be for Pass Mountain and Frenzy?
So she expects to be at Pass Mountain. From there, she's still in school right now, so it really is dependent on that schedule. But she said that she's got about 6 weeks that she can play with right now. So we expect her to be at Pass Mountain 24K. We'll see what happens for the rest of the series. I know that she would be extremely interested in competing for the Sonoran Desert Cup as a whole. So we'll see how that goes.
I mean, having run around her at back in June at the Jackrabbit Jubilee, Hotfoot Hamster.
Yeah.
I mean, she is consistent.
Yeah.
She is consistent and she can grind, and I would not be surprised if she makes this something that she's focused on.
Yeah.
That she's around the front of the pack.
Yeah.
By the time early April rolls around. And then our international woman of mystery, you called her in your interview. By the way, good time to mention, Chris did a wonderful job interviewing the top 3 men and women on the Aravaipa Instagram page. You can check out those interviews. He got to them right after the race is finished. It was really cool. And the interview with second place finisher Devin Nihill was really cool.
Yeah, no, she was great. I mean, for somebody who I don't think she had any idea that we had gone through and kind of Googled her, and I tried to let her know that it was in the most innocent of interests. It was,
we're not just creepy guys.
Yeah,
we're literally wanting to get information.
When I approached, I said, "Hey, Devin, my name's Chris. I work for Aravaipa, and we saw your name on the list, and we went through some of the people who didn't have ultra sign-up scores, and we saw that she had run a 1:24 half marathon.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, and that's right in lockstep with where Megan's personal bests are. I believe that she's between 120 and 124. So it's like, oh, we might have ourselves a bit of a race here. And Devin, for her first trail race, acquitted herself very well.
Yeah. I mean, second place. She's a beast coaster. I highlighted it in the pregame show. Beast coaster, former Division I lacrosse player. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Chris, you have a knack for scouring the internet for these no ultra sign-up results people. It was a couple of years ago at Cocodona.
Josh Perry.
You found Josh Perry. Zero ultra sign-up results, but Josh had been like an FKT crusher.
Yeah. Well, and with a lot of these runners who are sliding over to trail for the first time, I think we actually have to keep a closer eye on the Sonoran Desert Cup, because it's one thing to have somebody slide into Cocodona without an ultra sign-up score, because the likelihood of somebody, Josh Perry notwithstanding, someone coming in and being competitive is probably more remote. With a 24K, if you're a fast road runner that has leg speed, that's a half marathon. You can slide in and potentially see what you can do out there on the trails. And Devin,
so we probably do need to keep an eye on that. But Devin, great debut. And did she give you an indication if she's interested in coming to either of the next 2 races?
I think that she has caught the bug based on what I spoke with her. One of the fun things about Devin's conversation was that, I said, what was it like for you out there with your first trail race? And she told me in our post-race interview about how when she was out there at the start line in Anthem, she kind of looked around, and apparently like Megan must give off that vibe, and she's like, I need to look out for that girl. And she was right. She said that Megan looked like poised and confident right from the start. And so Devin and Megan didn't realize this, but Megan knew heading in that there was another fast woman she needed to keep an eye out for. She just didn't know. She didn't know what Devin looked like.
Right. Yeah.
So Megan went and did her thing, and apparently, like up until the very end, Devin was never more than a couple minutes behind her. Basically, they both got to go, John. Megan got there, it sounds like a little bit sooner, like maybe about a minute and a half sooner. And Devin, 90 seconds with a 5K to go, yeah, you can give chase. But she saw Megan. The first thing you do after you leave Go, John, is go up about a 600-foot climb in under a mile. And Devin looked at that, and she just said, "Yeah, I'm not. I think that second place is going to be just fine.
Second place is going to be just fine." And it was a 5-minute gap. I mean, not 5 and change. So a good solid finish.
Yeah, but for an inaugural run, I think that Devin did very well, and hopefully she decides that she's going to stick around for the rest of the Sonoran Desert Cup because. For a debut race to show that you are competitive with Aravaipa racing team members, it's really impressive.
Absolutely. And then third place was Brittany Lump.
Yeah, Brittany came in. There was a substantial gap between second and third there, about 18 minutes, give or take. But Brittany's a local out of Fountain Hills and no stranger to running Aravaipa races. Mm-hmm. So, she looked pretty good coming in, a big smile on her face, looked like she enjoyed the day out there, which I can't say everybody did.
Yeah, that's right.
It was pretty cooking out there. A little bit further down on the women's side, Victoria Uribe finished in fourth. Jackie Jacoby, one of our local Aravaipa Group Trail Run members, finished in fifth. Diana Segrist, more of a fixed time flat course runner, finished in sixth, which actually is pretty impressive because, I think I mentioned during the pre-show, she had run this race back 8, 10, 11 years ago. But for her to come out here and do a pretty solid top 10 finish is pretty good. Toscella Gabriella Henry in seventh. Teresa Moraski at the age of 59 finishing in eighth.
Very impressive.
Absolutely.
Very impressive.
Danielle Castro out of Glendale in ninth. And a non-local, Raquel Martinez, coming to us from Houston, finishing in 10th. So that's your top 10 on the women's side.
And then a pretty closely bunched group of Marin Alred, Jennifer Oten, Sunday Fatimi, all within about 5 minutes of 10th place. So there's your top 10, 12, 13. And Sonoran Desert Cup round 1 is in the books.
Yeah. Let's quickly pivot to what the other races had happen out there.
Yeah.
So I want to congratulate the winners of the other distances out at Cave Creek Thriller this weekend. There were 4 distances. There was a 50K, a 24K, the 11K, and the 5K. In the 50K, a familiar name was the overall winner in Nick Curry with a time of 4:23:18.
For Nick, it was probably chilly.
It was chilly, and it was a quick morning because Nick is known for just flat out, I guess, having great days out there. It was actually nowhere near the course record. The course record, 3:51 for this race.
Really?
So, yeah, so it's a pretty quick one. Natalie Horn, actually, I watched Natalie's finish, and she finished in 4:59:30. She wanted that sub-5 real bad.
So was she hammering down
Oh,
the
yeah.
stretch?
She came down. She came in, and Nick and I were actually standing in the shade, and we're watching, and we're like, is that F1 right there? Because she was second overall, too.
Yeah.
Second overall, and she came in looking like, pushing really hard. So congratulations to Natalie. Had that goal to break 5 hours and came in, just under the gun there. So also with the 50K, there were, for a 50K, there were a sizable number of drops over the course. 52 out of 64 finishers in that 50K. That's not a high number for a 50K.
No.
So
now, is that similar? Is there a place where there's like a easy bailout?
Well,
where they circle back and they're close to the finish or at the finish?
Not necessarily. I mean, they do hit Gojan at mile 28 or so.
Okay. Well,
but
that's pretty far in.
Yeah. I mean, I've dropped at Gojan before,
have you?
but I totally have. Yeah. But yeah, it's.
I'm sure there's a story there.
I got lost on the course earlier, so I had actually done my 30-plus miles, so I was just not having fun anymore. In the 11K, Matthew Hamilton, who serves out there as a massage therapist for some of the runners, jumped in and decided to hammer the 11K, won with a time of 55:36. And Claire Natalie on the women's side ran a 1:11:27 to pace that race. Again, I don't know if I've ever seen multiple drops in a 10K before, but in the 11K here, we had 10% of the field drop almost.
Yeah.
That's
a lot. That says a lot about the conditions.
It was so hot.
Yeah, it was hot.
In the 5K, Monty Gibson paced the men with a time of 29:07, and Stephanie Flaster with a time of 30:11. So actually, that was pretty tight right there. I know that the men's time on that is nowhere near the course record, but I believe that the 30:11 run by Stephanie is maybe a couple minutes off the course record.
That's
there.
fast.
So,
That's fast.
Yeah.
And, you use the 5K as a little active recovery from your 100-miler at Hennepin.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was hot out there, but just your exposure to the course for, 45 minutes or so. What do you feel as though everybody was kind of tested?
Yeah, so the funny thing about the 5K, and I'm so glad, I went between the 5K and the 11K leading up, and I jumped into the 5K at the last minute. First of all, the 5K starts before the 11K to prevent a logjam heading up Gojon, because if you were to set it up the other way, you might have a lot of the 11K runners coming over the top of the 5K runners.
A lot of traffic, yeah.
Whereas the 5K runners, they're usually out of the way by the time the 11Ks come through because they start 15 minutes ahead. So the first mile of the course, 1.2 miles of the course, is just a climb up Gojon Trail. You climb up about 600, 700 feet, and then it's 2 miles of fun, smooth downhill. And I was probably 16 minutes slower than my best out there, but I was out there just to have fun. One of the nice things about doing the 5K also is that you do it early enough. It starts at 8 a.m., and the entire backside of the race is shaded.
It's still in shade.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
nice.
It's a wonderful, 2 miles on the other side of the
and for
hill.
those of you who haven't run in early morning desert races when the mountains still provide shade down to the valleys, it's wonderful. It's because we're really used to not much shade out here. So
Yeah.
when you get that kind of ambient shade, it's lovely.
Yeah, when we were coming over the final hill on the backside in the shade, and I was actually with two other runners, and we had been kind of just bouncing back and forth. And as we got up the last hill there, I told them, I said, "Well, there's no more shade here." And they were like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, but there's no more hills either." So that was, that was the Cave Creek Thriller 5K for me personally. I mean, I had a blast out there, even though my time didn't was nowhere near what I've done in the past. I was just out there to have fun.
Well, and again, Chris, you're a good example of what makes these events, these 7 events in this series, so much fun. Yes, we're focusing on the Sonoran Desert Cup races, those 22 to 30 or 40K races, but all 7 of these races have multiple distances, have great opportunities for friends and family to come and jump in the 5K, jump in the 11K, do the 24K. I think it's a really cool sort of series that we have going, and we kicked it off well. And I think the nice thing is, as we move on to Pass Mountain, the temperatures will cool down. Pass Mountain and then into Frenzy, and then of course the 2 races in January. So let's move on to Pass Mountain. I mean, we've got a preview show. It's November 9th, the race will be. Talk to me a little bit about what we can expect at Pass Mountain as compared to Cave Creek Thriller.
So Pass Mountain is actually fairly similar in a lot of ways to Cave Creek Thriller for the mid-distance. So this will be a 25K as opposed to a 24K. So at Pass Mountain, rather than point-to-point, it is a loop. It's kind of a weird little, it's kind of like a double loop. So,
okay.
So the runners will actually run nearly the entirety of the Pass Mountain 10K. So they run, basically it's a sloping downhill where you run far faster than you want to run at this point because you're.
That's the beginning.
Yeah, you drop about 100 or so feet in the first mile. So you're just cruising. It's flat. It's fairly buffed out, and then you hit a levee, where you're on this flat levee for another mile, and so of course you're running really fast on that. You head off the levee and into some sandier wash trails, which I'm not a huge fan of, but again, it's still fairly flat, still fairly smooth. And you basically follow this. You go over this, I believe it's called Cat's Peak. It's maybe an 80-foot climb and then right back down the other side. It's usually where the photographers stake out to catch people either heading up in their misery or heading down in their glory. And then you take this hard turn off of the 10K course. You take this turn off the course and you head to some trails that are kind of on the backside of Pass Mountain. Usury Park is what they call it. So then all of a sudden things get really kind of rugged. They're still flat, but they're a little bit more rugged. And then you hit your second aid station at this point, maybe about mile 7. Unfortunately, that's the final aid station you hit on the course.
Oh,
so
okay.
you actually go about 8
You've
miles.
got about 8 miles
Yeah.
from there to the finish.
And from there, it gets really gnarly. Like you start the climb up Pass Mountain itself, and the first, I would say, half mile is pretty clunky. Like, you know, until you actually get like up to the higher reaches of the climb, it's fairly technical. Mm-hmm. And then you get up to the top of the climb, and you can see, like, typically at this point, if you're a mid-packer like me, you see all the carnage. Like, people just kind of like hanging out in whatever shade they can find. There's a rock structure that provides a ton of shade up at the top of the mountain. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you'll see
people
like clockwork. You'll see a half dozen people hanging out on that overhang. And then from there, you actually, it's a smooth, buffed out downhill, beautiful views. You can see the mountains off to the east, the Superstitions. You get a great view of those. And that kind of just heads steadily downhill until you get to basically, I would say, about a quarter mile from the finish, and then you just run that last stretch out in and out of a couple of washes and hills. But it is like Cave Creek Thriller. It is a backloaded
right. It
race.
lulls you into a nice settled pace at the beginning, and then kicks you in the teeth in the second half.
Yeah,
and registration is still open.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, if you're interested in the Sonoran Desert Cup, of course, it's the best 2 races.
Yeah.
So maybe you missed the Cave Creek Thriller, or it was too hot for you. You could still run Pass Mountain and McDowell Mountain Frenzy.
Yeah.
And be in the hunt for those fall points.
Yeah, and if you're not interested in running for the Sonoran Desert Cup as well, the Pass Mountain portfolio includes a 50K, a 25K, a 10K, and a 5K. And those 5K and 10K they're really fast.
And Usery Park is just beautiful. It's pristine, like many of our desert parks. It's just pristine and beautiful, and early November is a great time out in the desert.
Yeah, the cool thing about the trailhead for Usery is that it basically sits in the just at the base of Pass Mountain, so you can see where those runners are going. Like, you know, like what those 25K and 50K runners are going through. The 50K is actually a double loop of the
course,
the 25K. Yeah, so. Yeah. Not my particular cup of tea, but people love this race. I mean, I've seen. I remember at Pass Mountain, the most unique thing about that for me is the year that I believe it was Catlow Shepek ran like a 3:47 and didn't make the podium.
Wow.
Like, that tells you how fast. Like, I believe it was Stephen Kirsch and Chris Mocco jockeying until the last final seconds for 1-2 in a race like that. So, maybe we'll see something like that in the 24K as well, and hopefully we'll see some more competition out there too.
And again, the week leading up to the race, we will be back here in studio and do a preview show.
Sure.
For Pass Mountain, when we have a really clear idea of who's in the race. And also, one more thing, we're working on it, not to entirely 100% confirm, but we are working on live streaming the 3rd race in this fall series for the Sonoran Desert Cup. The 2 of our favorite races are a race that's the favorite of the 2 of us, I should say.
Yeah.
The McDowell Mountain Frenzy,
yeah.
Which, interestingly enough, also takes place on the day of the Western States and Hard Rock Lotteries.
Yeah, there's going to be a whole lot going on out there. If we're going to be live streaming on location, I'm actually curious, because one of the things I've always wanted to do is live stream our watch party.
Yeah.
Because we've had people call for those lotteries and stuff like that. But if we've got all sorts of cameras going everywhere, it could be a genuine event.
It is so much fun. I remember our mutual friend Andrea Feldman getting her name drawn while she was out racing, phone blowing up, the whole thing. So,
Noel Kingston as well.
Yeah, Noel Kingston as well.
Last year got picked for Western States while he was running Frenzy. So I have known people that for the last 8 or 9 years who have gotten picked out there. So, if you're looking for a race to run this winter, the 25K at McDowell Mountain Frenzy, part of this the Sonoran Desert Cup, rather. I can't say that I can guarantee that you'll get picked for Western States if you run the 25K.
But the chances are good.
Yeah.
Or better than average.
It can't hurt you.
That's right.
I think that's pretty much all we've got here, but now we got to go and pivot our homework to the big things that we have coming up next weekend. Of course, Javelina 100 is just around the corner here, so we're going to, in between now and Pass Mountain, we're going to focus on the 100K and 100-mile distances, but that's about all we've got for now.
And I've got to run it. Run it. So my first 100 since 2021 and my first Javelina since 2007. So
Well,
looking forward to it.
When we reconvene in November, myself and what's left of AJW will have to tell you what happens or what we're looking forward to happening out at Pass Mountain. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you then.
Cheers.